Hello, you're watching a new episode of Melt. I'm Ritvika Gupta, and on the show today we'll be speaking with Mark Pollard. He's the CEO of strategy at Mighty Jungle. Anant Rangaswami had a rather interesting chat with him.
I think anybody can have an interesting chat with him because he is so different from, shall we say, the archetypical strategy thinker.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to him.
Yeah.
And what Mark brings to the table is a completely contrarian view to how people look at strategy. And normally you have strategists who are in-house, or you have strategists who are in, shall we say, the ad agency world.
Yeah.
So Mark is an independent thinker, and he sort of unveils himself into companies to understand what their real problems are, what their real issues are, and then gets down to trying to find solutions which are incredibly bespoke. So that's what Mark does.
And how important is it for marketers to understand strategy?
That's one of the conversations I have with Mark. I mean, how does he get business? Because he is very different. I can't see him walking in and getting business from 95% of the Indian corporates that I have dealt with, because he is so radical in his approach. And fundamentally, he deals more with people than with businesses. So it's people that he connects with rather than companies that he connects with. And therefore, they sort of trust him. Trust is a big part of what Mark does. Yeah. And it's a mutual trust. He trusts the company trusts him. And a lot of his time is spent in interrogation, in mining for insights, in trying to understand real pain points before he tries to sort of erase them. So he came and spoke at Z-Melt, which on the sidelines of which I had this chat. And I tried to understand what he thought of the event after he went away. And it's astonishing the amount of effort he put into describing his experience at Z-Melt. And I think that makes for a sort of great understanding of what he does and what people in his business should be doing. I think he's a great sort of example of what strategic thinkers should be doing. He's a listener, he's not a talker. He's soft-spoken, he's gentle, and he listens. It's very tough to do an interview with him because he listens. He doesn't want to talk. He wants to hear what you have to say, which is why the interview was challenging. But I think there's enough juice for people to sort of absorb and ruminate on.
All right, let's quickly have a look at the conversation. Let's get ready to melt with Mark Pollard.
Hi, Mark.
Hi.
So tell me, in a world where there's so much short-termism,
Yes.
where everybody is bothered about the quarterly sales and the quarterly revenues, is there any reason that you still exist?
Personally speaking, there's definitely a reason that I exist.
Right.
And it's to exist in a world that does currently exist like that. But I use if you're going to talk about short term, a lot of the way that I try to build my life right now is by thinking about death.
Right.
So
you can't get longer term than that.
There you go. Well, yeah, it could be today, it could be in 50 years' time, who knows? And so I think that's a pretty human way to think. I think it's a pretty natural way to think. It's not about quarters and forecasts and sales. They were all made up by people. But a lot of what I do is about, if I passed away, what decisions would I have liked to have made?
Right.
And how can I live consciously by trying to achieve those decisions more often than not.
Right.
And that's what I do with the work that I do. And a lot of people who do strategy work probably would identify with something like that while they're caught up in the short term.
Without using the word death, I think
maybe
that's a flip that you brought to the table, I think.
Maybe. I mean, when you've seen people pass away, like, it's not a difficult flip. It's like part of life.
Right. Absolutely.
And I think it's a useful and important creative constraint.
When I look at big brands and the A&M spends, the advertising and marketing spends, if I look at the budget for the next year, they'll have budget for many things, but they don't have budgets for consultants on strategy because they think they can do it in-house.
Sometimes?
Sometimes, yes. Okay, I'll catch you on that. And, they don't have budgets for training on strategy, for example.
True.
So why is it that you should have a budget in your A&M spend for strategy, or is it out of A&M and goes straight to the C-suite?
Well, it depends also on what you mean by the word strategy.
Right.
Because I would add to what you're saying that most people in business or even in the agency world, a lot of people think they're the strategist.
That's the
that
point.
they're creative. So
Right.
you multiply that by what you said, and it does make it difficult.
Right.
And so it's the way that I see strategy, which is more account planning in the UK, it's getting crowded out because
Right.
the management consultants are coming in saying that's not real strategy. Data and analytics are coming in going, we've got numbers, you don't, you fill stuff, you use numbers, but we're the numbers people. User experience, which I've done a lot of, which I love, is kind of coming in here as well, and it's become a commodity, right? Which is great for procurement.
Right.
Because then it's price to price, and then they don't have to buy it, and everyone does it. So it's a bit of a riddle. It's a riddle out there.
So how do you get out of that riddle and still make a living for yourself?
Me personally, or in general?
You personally. I think we go through the experience of a strategist through you. That's the easiest way to do it.
Okay. Well, there's a few ways. First of all, there are people who are building companies or who run companies who do use intuition from which to operate. Some of them are building businesses as an act of self-expression.
Right.
And so they're the people that I tend to attract, where they're trying to work out how to put themselves out in the world, but part of that's their business. And so that's where I kind of do work that I didn't even think I'd be doing 5 or 10 years ago, but it's quite meaningful for me because I could do interviews with 20 to 30 people, I could write a brand strategy. Maybe it gets used, maybe it doesn't. But then when I help the CEO write a presentation and I use their words back at them, that is like some of the most meaningful work that I could do, and I didn't know that that's where I would end up. Right? So there's obviously, to me, there's a group of people who immediately resonate with what I'm interested in. And at the same time, there are marketers who hear the echo of that, and then what happens is they do their growth hacking, they do their programmatic buys, and then the game changes, an algorithm changes, things get more expensive, and then they're like, oh, we should do something that gets attention rather than just jamming stuff at people.
That's the ultimate short-termism.
Yeah, and so I attract that type of person as well.
So should a company have somebody like you in-house, or is it better to have you outside?
I mean, a word like should is a difficult word a word like should is a difficult word for me to ever respond to. I mean, companies can do what they like.
Right.
And if you're talking about like me as in me,
you.
People who are very much like me, we're not employees.
Right.
We exist in a different way, in a different reality, and we try to stay in touch with that. And sometimes we get shamed about that for a very long time until you realize that that's who you are. So I think one of the challenges some companies have is a lot of the kind of more free-spirited, independent, rebellious people, you can't own them.
Right.
You got to work out how to work with them. Companies are really quick to own you. And even if you're doing consulting, people are really quick to treat you like a freelancer.
Right.
Fill in the freelance paperwork. It's like, well, I'm not a freelancer. This is a company-to-company interaction.
Right.
So I think as soon as some companies can get the idea out of their heads that they need to own people, especially people who are disobedient and mischievous, the better. Or if you hire them, know that that's who they are. And I think this is something that the management...
Expect the best out of you.
Exactly. Create an environment where you're like, that group over there, you're crazy.
Right.
Be crazy, I've got you, I'll protect you.
We're living in an over-metricized world where everything is measured and people try, especially ROI. So if a company commissions you or signs a contract with you to help them out, how do they measure whether they've got delivery for what they paid you? How does that happen? Because let's suppose it was sales, it was very easy. You can get an Excel sheet in 15 minutes. How does one know that you have delivered?
How does one know that I've delivered? It depends on what they're hiring me for. So if I'm working with someone who's a senior leader or running their own company and they're trying to build a business as an act of self-expression, my personal measurement is whether they relate to the words that I give back to them.
Right.
That's it. Because I can't control what they do with it. Like, I'm not involved in the execution of it.
Right.
But if I have a moment where they look me in the eyes, and sometimes, every now and then, there's a little tear, and every now and then someone will say, you gave me my words back to me in a more powerful way that I even recognized, that's my metric.
Right.
And that's my deathbed test.
Right.
So I try to do that more often than not. And again, like, I'm not involved with the stuff that goes out there, right? And I've had to detach myself more in New York from that idea. If I was in Sydney doing strategy, it's a more familiar operating system to me. And if I was writing briefs or strategy, I'd be more demanding of there being a connection from what I do to the output.
Right.
New York and America, it's really it's difficult. You know, it's higher stakes for some people. It can be more executional. There's not always the same kind of planning culture in places. So I've detached, and I look for more of a process goal versus an outcome goal. Where the process goal to me is, does that person see themselves in the writing? Did I do a session where a few people came up to me and said, there's 2 things that you said that I'm going to use now, I'm going to use it. And then eventually, hopefully that changes their career, and I get messages about all that kind of stuff. So that's what I personally look for.
Right. Now, you brought up procurement, and from all that you described, you can't work with procurement ever. I'm not you.
Yeah, okay. I don't do that.
Yeah, so fundamentally, you sound more like a personal trainer.
Sure.
Like a Zig Ziglar or something like that. Do you think a lot of CEOs need somebody like you, I'll say you, for example,
Okay.
as a sort of mirror, bouncing board, or call it what you want, so that they can extract the best out of themselves? Because that's the sense of what I'm getting here.
Sure. Yeah. I think there are a few adjacencies. There's personal trainer. There's therapist.
Right.
There's strategist. There's
Right.
artist. There's you can choose the adjacency. Again, I wouldn't want to say that a CEO needs or doesn't need a certain thing. It depends on
Who he is,
who
and
they
what he
are,
or she is doing,
right?
yeah.
But at the same time, I think your point is valid. I think it can be useful until it's not.
Right.
So, for example, there's definitely a trend to having an internal, maybe philosopher or psychologist in parts of America, and it's been joked about in the TV show Silicon Valley. And I know people in that world who do that, and they might have a coach for 2 or 3 months, and then they move on.
Right.
They're like, I got what I needed. And the point is not whether it's me or whether it's a coach. The point is to somehow get out of your habits,
Right.
and to try to see the world differently, more expansively, even though anyone who comes in, like me, is going to have certain we're going to have blinkers on. It's
Right.
just different kind of blinkers.
Right. Now, as opposed to, say, an ad agency business, which is by and large retainer-led and you're in contact with each other,
Yeah.
consultancies come and go. They
Sure.
do a job and they disappear. So do you do a job and disappear.
Yeah.
But in your case and the consultants, they hope to go back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or not always.
Oh.
Are there times when you don't want to deal with this company ever again in your life?
Well, not so much now that I'm doing my own thing, because I think to some degree like attracts like. So most people who I work with have seen me do silly drawings,
Right.
and that intrigues them, and that's part of their decision-making process, because they Google all the people that they could work with, and yet they hire me. And at the same time, like I like novelty and variety. I like to move around. I like to feel independent. I don't set up relationships where there's a dependence.
It's a funny situation. You hunt for clients, or do clients hunt for you?
I don't do outbound. I don't hunt.
Or you don't do outbound at all, right?
No.
Right. So that presupposes that you have to sort of build your personal brand. People have to know you, and you know that you exist.
Yes.
And know what you do,
Yes.
right? So what kind of effort do you put into that?
Well, see, personal brand, I don't use that term very often, because a lot of what I do, and I don't mean this in a disingenuous way, but to me, a lot of what I do on the internet is a creative practice.
Right.
It's like how I want to exist in the world.
And you would have done it anyway.
I'd need to do something like that, yeah. And if for the years where I don't do that, my mental health is not good.
Right.
And so the way out for me is to channel it somewhere, and based on the world right now, that's how I'm existing.
Right.
And a lot of my personal brand or even my business stuff, it's not very clear-headed. I don't have clear calls to action. My website is a Google Doc.
Right.
It's how I want to exist, and I pay attention to that, and I know that there can be a lot of privilege in being able to do that, but I don't know any other way. And when I don't honor that, it's just not good for me.
Right.
So
So tell me, I get the sense from your presentation earlier and now that really big brands, the only way they can work with you if you've got a personal connect with one human being over there. Is that possible in this globalized world of multinationals and the NASDAQ and being listed and so on? To cut through the clutter, and then suppose that the guy, say, in IBM who met you and wanted to work with you.
yeah.
Would you be able to work with that company, not with him?
Yeah, the company doesn't bother me too much. It is
Right.
about the individuals. It's about the team, and to me, it depends on how much they can encourage an environment and respond to honesty or candidness. Because when I do research, I can find things.
Which are unpleasant.
Well, they could be unpleasant, or they could be, so I was interviewing men about losing hair.
Right.
And a gentleman said to me, I don't feel accomplished enough to be bald.
Right.
Now, that's pretty interesting to me.
Right.
I've interviewed thousands of people. I'm like, I haven't heard it that way before. It's an idea. It's two things that don't always exist together. What can I do with that? But if you take that into a company, they might be looking for insights that are completely different language and sound more academic. And so I think that's the cultural leap that needs to happen for me to be able to work with someone.
Yeah. So while you were talking about the interviews, a lot of, shall we say, the creative business, whether it is creating an ad or creating a presentation, or even doing the interviews, somehow technology has allowed people to do it at scale very quickly and very cheap.
Yeah.
And people think that's a better way to do it.
Yeah, I don't do that.
I know you don't do that, obviously, because you just described, I could have visualized the person with no hair sitting opposite you when you did that.
Yeah.
So why is that better, or is it, than doing it on the net and through SurveyMonkey or something like that?
Well, I mean, so when I'm doing strategy work and not training, I interview people on the phone.
Right.
And I type it up as I go.
Right.
I don't record.
Okay.
And it's just what I need. I like to feel words. And
Right.
I'll type, and I might write a phrase down, and then I'll type, and I can type pretty quickly because I was on the internet as a teenager. And so that's just my personal, it's how I like to exist.
Right.
You know, I love to feel the words and write them down, and I can't really turn that off. So whether or not that's better or not as good for a large company is not even the question. To me, it's like, how do I get an answer? How do I find something that's interesting? And that's what I pay attention to.
Right. So tell me, of all the consultancy you've done, if consultancy is my word, not yours.
Sure.
Tell me, what job has given you the most satisfaction? You don't have to name the brand or the company.
Yeah.
You can say to the company, like whatever.
The most satisfying, I need to think about this.
The 2, 3 who've given you intense satisfaction. I don't want to trap you into one.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to answer that question because you are talking about your children, which is a bit of a cliche in the writing world. But the two types of satisfaction that are, there's 3 people that are coming to mind, and I won't name them. The type of satisfaction was not the type of satisfaction that I set out to achieve.
Right.
And it was, for one person, them looking me in the face and saying, you gave me my words back in a more powerful way than I expected. And I remember the words, it stuck with me. Another is a CMO of a pretty well-known publishing company in England telling me that the one page that I wrote, he took it around to a lot of meetings. And I was like, that's my strategy work with them. Their voices are in it. It's not me at them.
Right.
It's me authoring, them authoring through me.
Right.
And taking it to meetings just to ground the team. And I was like, that's cool. And then another company, the founders were on Shark Tank in the States, and we did some research with another consultancy, did some strategy, and wrote some taglines, and then I helped the CEO get a presentation together for a health and wellness session in a big Silicon Valley startup. And there were 3 ways that I did not expect to be doing my work when I started. And very personal, very intimate. I feel a responsibility for what they were doing, but also it's fun. You know, it's not earnest. Like, it's earnest and then it's not. And so they're kind of like 3 use cases or 3 ways that I've responded to people responding to what I've done that were not in my head 5 years ago.
Fantastic, because you gave me 3 sort of success or happiness cases, and you didn't mention the word money once. You didn't mention profit once. You didn't mention sales once.
Yeah.
You didn't do any of those things, and that's what one is so used to hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Maybe I'm irresponsible though.
pardon?
Maybe I'm irresponsible.
Maybe you are, and it's fantastic. May you stay responsible. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anant.
And I hope we come back when you're a little more irresponsible.
Oh yeah, I'm just
Back here.
starting.
Oh,
I'm just
fantastic.
starting. Thank you.
That was the conversation. Anant, what can marketers take away from this chat?
It's funny. I think what they should take away from this chat is open their minds to thinking that good strategy can be done by somebody on the outside. perhaps because they have an unbiased, unjaundiced view of your business. They're cold, calm, collected in their thinking. So that's one. The second is, of course, to get procurement to understand the need for somebody like this. You know, I keep harping on procurement every few episodes. It's because I think they're a bit of an impediment to business. I speak to Mark about procurement as well. And because he's dealing with human beings and not a corporate, he sort of bypasses the procurement problem. But I think in India, he will get stuck when it comes to somebody saying, what is he doing that somebody else is not doing? And it's only when you speak to clients of Mighty Jungle or you read case studies that you know what value Mark and Mighty Jungle bring to the table.
All right, on that note, here's presenting the Mel cheat sheet. That's a wrap on this episode of Melt. You can watch all our content on our social media platforms. Our handle is Ready to Melt, and I'll see you next week, same time, same place. Goodbye.